Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive all about Cognition Labs. They're a company that's been making a lot of noise lately with this thing they call agentic AI. It's essentially AI that can act on its own, like to actually achieve a goal.
Hmm.
And the really interesting part is how they're applying it to the world of software development.
Yeah, it's pretty wild stuff. What I think is really cool about Cognition Labs is that they're not just kind of messing around with AI. They seem to really be aiming to fundamentally change software development as we know it. And they've got a pretty incredible team to do it.
Right.
Have you heard about the founders at all? Scott Wu, Stephen Howe, and Walden Yan?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, 10 International Olympiad in informatics gold medals between the three of them.
Yeah.
Like that's not just luck.
Yeah.
That's a sure sign that you've got some serious brain power focused on algorithms and machine learning.
It's not just the medals either. I mean, these guys have serious experience at top tech companies, and they have been deeply involved in some really cutting edge AI projects. So they're bringing a really unique combination of skills and insights to the table.
So they've got the talent for sure. But what are they actually building with it?
Their main product right now is called Devin AI, and it's designed to be like an autonomous software engineering assistant. So imagine you have a virtual developer on your team that can write code, debug code, and even optimize code all on its own.
Okay, so it's not just about writing code from scratch. It's involved in the whole development process.
Exactly. It's meant to handle things like testing, code reviews, even deployment pipelines. Basically, it's taking on many of the tasks that human developers typically handle, which is kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
Yeah, I bet that leads to some interesting conversations. But before we get into that, I'm curious why focus on software development in the first place? I mean, AI could potentially have an impact on tons of industries.
That's a great question. Software development actually makes a ton of sense as a starting point for this kind of agentic AI. First of all, coding is all about very strict rules and syntax, which makes it a good fit for AI to learn. It's kind of like teaching a robot to play chess. There's a clear set of rules and moves.
So the structure of software development makes it easier for AI to work within those boundaries.
I got it. Right. And on top of that, there's just this massive demand for developers to be more productive. Every company wants to build software faster and better. And there's a huge shortage of good developers globally. So a tool like Devin AI that can automate tasks and make development teams more efficient is extremely attractive.
For sure. But you mentioned earlier that there are some interesting conversations happening around this. I imagine some people are concerned about the implications of AI taking over tasks that humans traditionally do.
Oh, absolutely. We'll definitely get into those concerns. But before we do, you have to understand just how quickly Cognition Labs has become a major player. We're talking unicorn status, $1 billion valuation in less than a year.
Yeah, their growth has been unbelievable. They started with a seed round of $21 million from Peter Thiel's Founders Fund back in early 2024, and that already valued the company at $350 million. Then, just a few months later, they raised another $175 million in a Series A round led by Founders Fund again, which shot their valuation up to $2 billion. That's a ton of confidence from some pretty serious investors.
It really shows you how much potential people see in this technology. And it's not all just hype either.
Wow.
Devon AI is actually being used by big companies already, and they're reporting real benefits like increased productivity cost savings and faster development cycles.
And it's not just about being faster and cheaper, right? I mean, this kind of technology could potentially change the entire way we think about software development. What do you think that looks like?
It's hard to say for sure, but the possibilities are exciting. I mean, imagine a future where developers can spend most of their time on the creative and strategic parts of software design, while AI handles the more repetitive and time-consuming tasks. That could lead to a huge wave of innovation in software.
That's a really interesting vision. But let's go back to those concerns for a minute. What are some of the potential downsides or challenges that people are bringing up about this kind of technology?
I think one of the biggest concerns, of course, is what this means for jobs. If AI can do more and more of the work that human developers do now, will there still be a need for human programmers in the future?
That's a really important question, and one that we need to think about carefully. It's not just about jobs being lost, it's about how this technology could change the entire nature of software development.
Right. And then there are the questions about the quality and security of the code that AI generates.
Mhm.
How do we make sure that code written by an AI is reliable, secure, and meets the same standards as code written by experienced human developers?
Those are all important points, and I think it's important to remember that this is still a very new technology. We're just at the beginning of understanding how it will develop and what the long-term effects will be. But it's definitely something worth paying attention to.
Definitely. And one of the things that I think is interesting about Cognition Labs is that they seem to be really aware of these concerns. They're not just focused on building cool tech, they're also thinking about the ethical and societal implications of their work.
So it sounds like they're trying to be responsible with this technology, which
Mm.
is good to hear. But let's dive a little deeper into the technology itself. How does Devin AI actually work? What's going on behind the scenes?
So, at its core, Devin AI is powered by deep learning and reinforcement learning algorithms. These algorithms allow it to learn from huge amounts of data, identify patterns, and then make decisions based on what it's learned.
So it's kind of like teaching a computer to learn from experience, right? But what kind of experience are we talking about? What kind of data is it learning from?
Well, it's been trained on a massive data set of open source code documentation and even code reviews. This lets it understand the nuances of different programming languages, coding styles, and best practices.
So it's not just learning to write code, it's learning to write good code.
Mm.
It's picking up on the conventions and best practices that human developers use.
Exactly. And the reinforcement learning part is key. Devon AI is always learning from how developers interact with it and from the feedback it gets on the code it produces. So it's not just a static system, it's constantly evolving and getting better.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
But if it's learning from human developers, does that mean it's limited by the quality of the code it sees? Like, could it pick up bad habits or even perpetuate biases that already exist in the code?
Yeah, that's a good point, and it's something that Cognition Labs is working on. They're trying to make sure that the training data is as diverse and representative as possible, and they're building ways to detect and mitigate any potential biases in the AI's output.
It's good to hear.
Mm.
Sounds like they're approaching this with a lot of care. But let's switch gears for a second and talk about the competition. Cognition Labs isn't the only company working on agentic AI, is it?
No, definitely not. The agentic AI space is becoming super competitive with some really big players like OpenAI and Google getting involved.
Yeah, those are some tough competitors.
Yeah.
What do you think gives Cognition Labs an advantage in this crowded field?
I think they have a few key advantages. First, their team is incredible, like we talked about. Their combined knowledge of both AI and software development is pretty unmatched. Second, they have a first mover advantage in this specific area. They're one of the first companies to really make agentic AI for software development work commercially, which gives them a head start.
Yeah, and they have that big partnership with Microsoft.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Integrating Devon AI with the Microsoft Azure cloud platform gives them access to a ton of potential customers, and it adds a lot of credibility to their product.
It sounds like they're in a good position.
Yeah.
But even with all these advantages, there are going to be challenges,
Yeah.
right? What are some of the hurdles they might face as they grow?
I think one of the biggest challenges is going to be maintaining the quality and security of the AI-generated code as they start tackling more complex tasks and working with more diverse code bases. And they also need to stay ahead of the competition. OpenAI and Google have a lot of resources, and they're catching up fast.
Right. And we can't forget about potential regulations. Governments around the world are starting to pay attention to AI, and we could see new rules that affect how companies like Cognition Labs operate.
Yeah, that's definitely something to watch. But even with all these challenges, it's clear that Cognition Labs is a company to keep an eye on. They're at the forefront of a major technological shift, and they're likely to have a big impact on how software is developed.
It's been a really interesting look at Cognition Labs so far. We've talked about their amazing team, their innovative technology, the potential benefits and challenges, and the competitive landscape. But there's still a lot more to explore.
For sure. Next, we'll take a look at some real-world examples of how Devon AI is being used, and we'll discuss some of the long-term implications of this technology.
So we've talked a lot about the potential of Devin AI and what it could do, but I'm really curious to hear about how it's actually being used right now. Are there any examples of companies using it in the real world?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There are already some pretty interesting use cases out there. For example, there's a large fintech company that's using Devon AI to automate the generation of boilerplate code for financial transactions. This was a task that used to take their developers hours to do manually, but Devon AI can now do it in minutes, which frees up the developers to focus on more complex and creative work.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's like taking care of the tedious stuff so the humans can focus on the interesting stuff. But what about more complicated tasks? Can Devin AI handle really complex coding challenges?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, another company, a healthcare startup, is using Devon AI to develop algorithms for analyzing medical images. These algorithms are super complex, but Devon AI can learn from these huge data sets of medical images and actually generate really accurate code.
Wow, that's incredible. Seems like Devin AI is already having a real impact in a bunch of different industries. But let's go back to those bigger questions about the long-term implications of this technology. We've talked about jobs, but what are some of the other potential consequences for society?
One thing that comes to mind is the potential for this to really accelerate technological advancement. If AI can handle a lot of the basic work in software development, it could free up human developers to really push the boundaries of what's possible. We could see a much faster pace of innovation, especially in areas like AI itself, biotechnology, and renewable energy.
That's a really exciting possibility.
Mm.
But could there be negative consequences too? I've heard some people express concern that as AI becomes more powerful, it could lead to even more wealth and power being concentrated in the hands of a few big tech companies.
Yeah, that's definitely a valid concern. It's super important to make sure that the benefits of this technology are shared widely and that we don't end up in a situation where only a small group of people have access to the power of AI.
So regulation and oversight are going to be really important to make sure this technology is developed and used responsibly. But let's talk about education and training. If AI starts taking over a lot of the traditional coding tasks, what does that mean for people who want to become software developers?
Mm.
What skills will they need to be successful in this new world?
That's a great question. I think the role of the software developer is going to change quite a bit. Instead of focusing mainly on writing code, developers will need to be more like architects and designers. They'll need to be able to come up with complex systems and then guide the AI in implementing those systems.
So the emphasis will shift away from just coding skills and more towards things like problem solving, critical thinking, and being able to work effectively with AI.
Exactly. And there will also be a growing need for developers who specialize in AI itself, people who can build, train, and manage these AI systems.
It sounds like the education system is going to have to adapt pretty quickly to prepare people for this new world of AI-driven software development. But let's change gears a little bit and talk about some of the more philosophical implications of this technology. What does it mean for our understanding of intelligence and creativity when AI can create software, something that we used to think of as a uniquely human capability?
That's a really deep question, and it's something that philosophers and scientists have been debating for a long time. As AI gets more advanced, it really challenges our ideas about what it means to be intelligent and creative.
Some people say that AI will never be truly intelligent or creative, that it's just a tool that's mimicking human abilities. Others think that AI could actually become more intelligent and creative than humans. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it's important to remember that we still don't fully understand intelligence and creativity even in humans. It's possible that AI could develop its own forms of intelligence and creativity that are different from ours, but just as valid and important.
That's a really interesting perspective. It suggests that we need to be open to new and unexpected forms of intelligence and creativity as AI continues to develop. But speaking of development,
Hmm.
where do you see this technology going in the next 5 to 10 years? What are some of the breakthroughs or advances that we might see?
One area where I think we'll see a lot of progress is in developing AI systems that can really understand human intentions. This would let developers communicate with AI in a much more natural way, using everyday language instead of code.
So it'd be like having a conversation with the AI, telling it what you want to achieve, and letting it figure out the best way to do it in code.
Exactly. And I also think we'll see a shift towards more specialized AI systems. Instead of trying to create one AI that can do everything, we'll probably see AI systems that are designed for specific industries or areas like healthcare, finance, or gaming.
That makes sense. Specialization would allow the AI to become much more knowledgeable in a particular area, and that would lead to better solutions.
Right. And one area that I'm particularly excited about is the potential for AI to help us tackle some of the world's biggest problems. Things like climate change, poverty, and disease.
So it's not just about making software development more efficient. It's about using AI to make the world a better place.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this technology so fascinating. It has the potential to not only change the way we work, but also to have a positive impact on humanity.
I'm really curious to see what the future holds for Cognition Labs and for agentic AI in general. It's a rapidly evolving field with so many possibilities. But before we wrap up, I want to talk about one more thing: the role of human developers in this new world of AI-driven software development. We've talked about the potential for job losses, but could AI actually create new opportunities for developers?
I think it definitely could. As AI takes over more of the routine tasks in coding, it could open up space for human developers to focus on more creative and strategic work. We might see a big increase in demand for developers who specialize in areas like AI architecture, AI training, and AI ethics.
So instead of replacing developers, AI could actually enhance their skills and create new paths for them to specialize and grow.
Exactly. And I think it's important to remember that AI is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. The future of software development really depends on how we choose to use this technology.
That's a good point.
Ah,
We have a responsibility to make sure that AI is developed and used in a way that benefits everyone. But for now, let's take a break and think about what we've learned about Cognition Labs and their journey in the world of agentic AI. They've come a long way in a short time, and they've definitely given us a lot to think about. We'll be back in a bit to wrap up our deep dive.
Okay, so we've talked about how Devin AI is already being used, and we've gotten into some pretty deep questions about what this all means for software development and even for society as a whole. It really feels like we're at the beginning of a huge shift in how software is made and what it can do.
Yeah, no doubt. And you know what I find really interesting is how Cognition Lab seems to be handling this balance between like pushing the limits of technology and also being aware of the concerns people have. I mean, this is powerful stuff.
It is. It's easy to get caught up in all the exciting possibilities, but we have to remember that AI could be incredibly beneficial, but it could also be disruptive. It's kind of like we're at a fork in the road, and the decisions we make now are going to determine how this technology shapes our lives. I like that analogy, and I think Cognition Labs gets that. They have a responsibility to be careful and thoughtful about how they develop and use this technology. It's not just about them being successful, it's about building a better future.
And it's not just on them either, right?
yeah.
This is a conversation that needs to include developers, policymakers, people who think about ethics, and the public. We all need to be part of shaping how AI develops.
Definitely. It's not just a tech problem, it's a societal problem, and we need to work together and talk openly to figure it out.
Well, I think we've made a good start on that conversation today. We've explored the potential of agentic AI, the challenges that come with it, and the questions we need to be asking as this technology keeps evolving.
It's been a great conversation. I hope our listeners have a lot to think about after this.
Me too.
Yeah.
One thing's for sure. If Cognition Labs is any indication, the future of software development is going to be pretty wild. It's
Wow.
going to be a crazy ride with a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see where it all goes.
Well, that's about all the time we have for our deep dive into Cognition Labs. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll be back next time with another look at the world of technology and all the amazing things that are happening. See you then.